Hello and welcome to the Rams Talk podcast, and it's another midweek show. It's currently the 4th of February, the day after the transfer window has closed, and we've got a lot to talk about, don't we, today? I'm currently joined here with Kieran and Dan. Kieran, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me. First, I'm glad that it's at such a really great time to be a Derby fan that I'm joining the pod. So thanks for
that. Yeah, no worries. And Dan, how are you?
Yeah, good. It does feel like I'm coming on after a loss again because yesterday was just so disappointing for all of us. But try and pick the bones of it now, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? And obviously, like I say, the transfer window has closed yesterday, I'm sure, as everybody knows. And Derby County have had 4 outgoings and 4 incomings in this window, and I'll just quickly go over them. We saw, obviously, the Wolves loanee Torreira have his loan cancelled, which I think most Derby County fans could see coming at the time. He had limited game time, and his performances just probably weren't up to that standard that we expected. He's currently actually gone on loan to League One Wycombe as well on deadline day, if I'm correct in saying that. Sonny Bradley also moved on loan to Wycombe directly from Derby. We've seen James Collins move to Lincoln City, and we've seen Erin Cashin move to Brighton and Hove Albion for reported around £10 million fee, I think it's estimated, which is obviously probably the biggest outgoing of Derby County's January transfer window and probably season so far. In terms of the incomings, we signed Norwegian forward Salverson from Viking FK, who's currently played 3 matches from Derby now, and also scored a goal away at Cardiff City. We also signed Matt Clark for, I think, just south of £1 million from Middlesbrough until the end of the season. We've also signed Langas from the same club as Salverson, Viking FK, for reported around £4 million. That was just after the Sheffield United game and just after Erin Cashin had left for his reported fee. And we've also signed on deadline day. The only signing that we made on deadline day was Harrison Armstrong on loan from Everton, the highly rated 18-year-old. Comes in on loan, but he's only played a handful of senior appearances. So, yeah, that's one to make of that as you will. But we'll get straight into it now. And Derby, the 4 signings, the 4 outgoings, for me, I feel like we've not really strengthened, or we may not have gotten any worse in terms. I think we sort of plateaued a little bit with just bringing in 4 players to replace the 4 that have left. It's not helped. We've had some injuries as well this month with Curtis Nelson being ruled out for the rest of the season, which is a huge miss for us and probably forced our hand to sign Clark a little bit as well. But I'll go to you, Kieran, first. In terms of the outgoings, I think most Derby fans are happy with the 3 that have left. Then obviously the main one that I'm going to talk about is Erin Cashin. What do you make of the Erin Cashin transfer? Do you think it's the right time for him to have gone for the right estimated fee, or do you think maybe we could have held on until the end of the season?
I think fees are always a difficult one because a player's only worth what someone's prepared to pay for them. And I think I didn't hear about lots of other clubs other than Brighton being interested. We know they were 12 months ago or whatever it may be. But I think the value that we've got for him, I think we've done well. We're going to see that as a positive of the uplift that we've had on him from the offer maybe last summer. Would it have been ideal to have kept him around for longer? I think so, because it feels like we're kind of going into a completely new centre-half pairing, but equally we've got to be pragmatic about the offer that's on the table and also what the player wants as well. I mean, he wants to take the contract, play Premier League football potentially, or that kind of longevity. So, yeah, it would have been nice if he'd have been around for longer, but I think we've got to be pragmatic. I don't think whether we stay up or not this season will be down to whether Cashin stays or not. I think that the likes of Clark and hopefully, like I know we haven't seen him yet, but I would hope that isn't the difference between us staying up or going down. So, yeah, I don't think it's a bad sale, but and I can understand why we've done it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there, and I think it's a good point you make about you're not thinking that Erin Cashin would have made that difference between staying up or going down. Like we say, Matt Clark coming in is a solid option. I know I'll hold my hands up and say I've never seen Langas play before, so I can't really judge a player before I've seen him play for Derby. But Dan, I'll come to you as well about that. Happy with the Erin Cashin sale? Do you think it can help has helped bolster the finances for the January window that we've just seen?
I'm with Kieran on this. I don't think it'll play too massive a factor. I don't think we'd ever get more money than what we got for him. To be honest, I think we would have just been holding on to him. He's already stuck around when he probably could have left. He goes with everyone's best wishes. It's not his fault that we're in the situation that we're in right now. It wasn't Nelson's fault either. I do actually think we've strengthened, because I think Matt Clark's a better player than Cashin at this stage in his career. And I hope that this other lad, I'm going to say Longas, Jamie was talking about how to pronounce it the other day. If he comes and he's as good as what everyone's making him out to be, then it's a really good deal.
Yeah, and hopefully, as I think for reported around £4 million fee, it kind of has to be as well, doesn't it? That's almost half of the reported cash in money. He's highly rated in Norway. I think I saw a thread today on Twitter of the Norway manager discussing his signing to Derby and how he almost thought he could have gone on to play in the Premier League instead of the Championship. So hopefully that's signs of things to come for him and how good he could be for us. But we'll talk about the first two signings that we've made in this window now coming into the club. Obviously, Salverson, like I mentioned at the start, he's played 3 matches now. He scored away at Cardiff City. We've seen Matt Clark come into the fold as well after him signing. Kieran, how impressed have you been with those players in obviously the early viewings of them? I know Salverson's got a bed in to Derby County. We've seen Matt Clark for 2 seasons before, but how impressed with those signs have you been so far from early impressions?
Yeah, so if I go Clark first, I think we all know what we're going to get with Matt Clark, don't we? We've seen him at the club for 2 years previously. He hasn't got any faster, and he isn't going to get any quicker. I've seen kind of 10-ton trucks turn a bit quicker than him at times, but he is what he is. He's a very solid, dependable. I think centre half, kind of middle to lower half, Championship centre half, and also I think the thing that we're getting more with him now than what we used to have is more experience now. Do you know what I mean? He's had another 3 or 4 years since he last was at the club, so he knows this division really well. So I think we know what we get. My only not concern with the Clark transfer, but is how we play moving forward, because we've got Clark, we've got Nat Phillips, and we've obviously got the new chap Langus, and it's how you fit the 3 in, because I will be absolutely petrified if we shape up with Matt Clark on the left-hand side of a 3, based on what I saw when he was here before, when Koku tried to experiment with the 3 just because of the pace, and especially if Forsyth's on the left wing back, there's not going to be a lot of pace down that side. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the Clark signing. We know what we're getting. The Salvus one is, like I say, we've seen green shoots, haven't we, of what could be something that could be there. Then we've still got to remember maybe how far he is behind on fitness. We're chucking him in kind of 30 odd games into a Championship season, where he's actually still just coming through the off season in Norway. So they're still kind of just doing their pre-season friendlies and stuff like that. And we're chucking him straight in, needing him to play 90 minutes all the time, not able to take him off and bring a sub on to freshen it up. But I think he's shown good movement. I think he gets in the right areas. He's a good presence aerially as well. So yeah, been impressed. But again, the strikers will only be judged by how good the chances that we create for them to stick it in the back of the net. James Collins has gone away and scored 2 goals because he's played for a side that have created a couple of chances. Not saying James Collins would have scored goals for us, but he definitely isn't going to score if we don't create any chances. So, but yeah, I think them two, I think they're both positives, and especially the Salvus one, it's moving in the right direction. We're not going to sign a striker for 6-7 million. We've got to find a bit of a gem or somebody that can come through and produce. So yeah, I think overall quite happy with them two so far.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there about Salverson needing maybe that 1 or 2 games to bed in. Obviously, we don't know where his fitness is at, obviously with the different seasons over in Norway. So I think, like you say, we've seen green shoots and hopefully there's more positivity to come from him. And I'll come to you, Dan, about those 2 signings coming in, and Kieran briefly mentioned it there. How do you think Derby are now going to shape up with those players in the side? Obviously, take into consideration the other 2 players that have signed in Armstrong and Langas, but do you think we're going to go with them 3 centre-backs, or do you think maybe we're going to switch to a 4-3-3 like we tried to play at the start of the season? Do you think we might even go 2 up top with both Yates and Salverson up top? How do you think Warren's going to have to try and play this going forward now?
Well, I think it's going to change based on the opponent, because he sent us his game preparation around the other team. So I would like to see us just go with the 2 at centre-half, because we mentioned before we come on, I can see us playing a lot more narrow in the second half of the season, particularly with the injuries to the wing backs and the lack of form from our wingers. I just want to touch on what Kieran said there as well about the quality of chances. You look back during Warne's entire time as manager, and I could probably count on both my hands the amount of clean one-on-one opportunities our strikers have had. Like Didsey was individual brilliance. That's why he scored so many goals. And Collins last season, the majority of them were either penalties or scruffy tap-ins from second balls on set pieces. I have no other. I have no other hope that we play two up front. I would like to see us just play two up front every game now, because the issue is not at the back. The issue is the fact that we're not scoring goals, which is after the game on Saturday when Warne talked about losing by 1 goal, which I took exception to. I didn't like that comment. He's not wrong, but I took exception to it. I think it's due to the fact that we're not scoring enough goals, and we're not going to score goals up front with Jerry Yates alone. We've seen that, and I think with Salverson on his own, it just plays too negatively into the opposition's hands. So I would like to see us probably go with a 4 at the back and go a little bit more narrow as well with 2 up front, particularly with the young man coming in. I hope that he comes in and makes a massive, significant impact on us, because it's such a weight on young shoulders coming in to what is at the moment an incredibly toxic atmosphere and a really tough set of cards. I'm really surprised that Everton have put him into this situation, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I wanted to briefly touch upon, obviously, the Harrison Armstrong sign. The player who's come with a lot of hype around him from Everton fans, who believe he's going to be a player with a lot of potential. He's obviously only made a handful of appearances, I think, if I can even call it that. Obviously, this season, I think the most notable one for him would be in the fixture against Peterborough United early on in the season, where I believe he got an assist in that cup game at Goodison Park. He's a player comes with a lot of highly rated ability, obviously for the reserve sides for Everton. But like you say, he's only just turned 18, if I'm correct. His birthday's in January, so he's a young player that Derby are bringing into, like you say, an environment which we're up against it in that relegation zone. It's such a tough place for a young player to come. I think Everton would much prefer it if he comes into an environment where he's allowed to grow and express himself in a full season. But he's got 4 or 5 months to really hit the ground running and leave a mark on it. And I really hope that we don't put, as a fan base, too much pressure on young shoulders. It's definitely not his fault, or won't be his fault if we do end up, unfortunately, being in that drop zone come the end of the season. But he's a player who likes to drive the ball forward. From highlight reels, he looks very box to box. Looks comfortable on the ball, moving quickly from transition. So maybe we can see why Paul Warne's signing. And Kieran, I'll come to you about how much do you think the weight of expectation is going to impact Armstrong's performances, or do you think this is an opportunity for him to really leave his mark on Derby County and come into a side where we need that little bit of quality going forward? We need someone to unlock those defences. What do you make of that transfer as well?
So yeah, I'm not going to lie. I don't know a lot about the kid. I think so it's difficult for me because I don't quite know where he's going to fit in as of yet. Is he going to kind of be an impact player maybe who comes off the bench, trying to freshen things up, playing off the strikers or something like that? So it's a difficult one because I don't quite know what he's about as a player as of yet. But I think, yeah, look, it's important that not just young players, but any player that we get behind them and we support them. And I fall into the camp of where I think some of the recent toxicity, as people are referring to it, has actually been more directed at the manager rather than the players, and it has been supportive of them, apart from the obvious kicking the ball out of play from 5 yards all the time. I think it's important that we get behind them. But I think it's important that we use him effectively. He's going to be somebody probably who's going to be able to impact games maybe later on, fresher legs, carrying that ball and linking up between the midfield and strikers. So that's what I'm hopeful. But it's very difficult to comment until we've seen him kind of fit in, and also very difficult to put so much pressure on him that he's going to be another Leon Osman or whoever it might be that's going to save our season. So I think if you can chip in with a goal or two or an assist or two between now and the end of the season, I think he would probably have done what we'd have expected from. But I also agree with Dan as well. I was very surprised that Everton have agreed to chuck a high prospect 18-year-old in to such a situation. But that could be the making of a player, can't it, as well? So so I think it's one to watch, really.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I just hope he's given that space and time in the midfield where he likes to play to express himself and his ability, because I think at the moment we are a very hard-working team. We've heard Armstrong say he always likes to give 100%, but let's see him use some of that ability to unlock the defences of some Championship teams, because I think we've mentioned on it here, we just so need some quality, I think, to set up some chances for us. And we've seen that he can do it early on this season against Peterborough. He got an assist, a lovely ball through in that one. But you mentioned it there about, I know, Dan, you mentioned it there about having to play a little bit narrower. And I think I'll go on to the question I think everybody wants to talk about in terms of, should we have made more signs on that deadline day, Dan? Should we have made more signs across this January window? And I would say in what positions, but I think the main ones that are probably screaming out to us would be on the wing and maybe in one of them full-back positions as well.
I think personally for myself, I'd like to see us play more narrow anyway. Obviously, we would have liked to see a couple more wide players come in. I do feel, I think we kind of get sold the dream every single transfer window, particularly January ones. I feel the fan base, the reaction yesterday was very top heavy, particularly when you look at the announcement video and then every single comment under it has nothing to do with the player. It's just to do with Pearce or Warne. And I think that the fan base is justified to feel let down because we're in such a sticky spot. If we were still sat where we were 5 weeks ago, I don't think anyone would have had nearly the reaction yesterday that they did with just the 4 signings. I would like us to play more narrow, but I think we did need some cover probably in the fullback areas. I think that the wide area, it depends which way he's going to play, because it's almost even when he does play with the left and the right winger and the fullbacks, the left and the right wingers, they're just totally ineffective. I mean, if you actually we say a lot of negative stuff about Caden Jackson, and Mendes-Lang has not covered himself in any glory this season. He's been up there with our worst performers. They're not really in the game at all. They're in the fullbacks overlap. We're heavily reliant on Kane Wilson, which I said in the group chat a few weeks ago that I'd like to see Kane Wilson get put as a right winger, and lo and behold, it's now getting put forward as a joke. Oh, let's start playing him as a right winger. For me, I'd prefer us to play more narrow. I think, just to carry on from what we were saying on the previous point, where does this leave Kenzo? Is Armstrong going to be a sort of 10 in behind 2 up front? Is Kenzo going to become the 10 and Armstrong's going to be more box to box? I really want to see players unlock other players, the potential of them as well. I just think there's such a good player in Kenzo and he's being completely negated. And maybe if we are a little bit more narrow, maybe Warne won't be as inclined to hit it long from the centre backs or long diagonals like Cash was so good at. Maybe he's then forcing himself to play through the middle a little bit more, because we have to play Ozo. He's imperative to our defensive structure, and he's even very good going forward. Ibu, same thing. Those two are playing. So how's Kenzo and Armstrong going to sit in the same team? I think I would have liked to have probably seen a couple of fullbacks come in as cover, but I know the majority of the fan base wanted to see some wingers, some creativity, trickery. But that's kind of where I stand on it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree with you. I'd like to see us play more now. It just worries me that under Paul Warne, we have been very one-dimensional over the last couple of years, but maybe with the injuries that we've got, like you say, hopefully he's maybe a little bit more inclined to play down the middle, especially with the fact that the midfield is probably the position that we're the strongest in, or at least have the most covering, and different players in that position. I think, me personally, I would like to see maybe a left-back come in as cover, maybe another Loney as cover on left-back if we have that position open or a free. But, it's one of them where we have to make do with what we have now. We've gone past that January window and this is the squad, and unless we sign any players on a free, which I think is probably unlikely, then this is the squad that we have. And I think, Kieran, I'll come to you now about maybe are we going to have to look at maybe a couple of square pegs in round holes going forward? We know that. I think we've talked about this over the last 2 years of Paul Warne being in charge, that we have deviated to this. I think recently we've seen Ebou Adams coming at right back when a lot of fans would like to see Jake Rooney on the bench be given an opportunity in that position, which is one of his positions. So how do you think you're going to see us going forward? Do you think we're going to see a couple of square pegs in round holes, especially out wide? Like Dan mentioned about Kane Wilson playing on the right a little bit further forward, because we know Paul Warne hasn't really relied upon Bartkazen too much this season, or even Joe Ward if he's able to come back into the fold. So how do you think you're going to see some of them Derby positions going forward?
Well, I think it depends who's in charge. But if it is Paul Warne, then we are going to continue to see square pegs in round holes, because that's what he seemingly seems to do. Although we have got a depleted squad, I still think that we should be playing people in the correct positions. I think the Wilson one's an interesting argument. I may be controversially, I'm not a huge Wilson fan. I think he goes charging forward but has very little quality and end product. And I think that even if we think we might play him further forward, Nyambi will come back and he'll just break down again after half an hour, and he'll have to go back in at right back because there's no other cover in there. So I think that I think it's an interesting point, but I think that we need to I think we need to move away from how Warne wants us to play and start to play in a way that actually accommodates the players that we've got, which I think is partially the issue, is that he can't decide how he wants to play. So we've got a mismatch of squad of whether we're trying to play 3 at the back or whether we're trying to play 4 at the back. And that's where we get into a mess, because we haven't got good enough wingers to play as a 4, but we haven't got good enough wing backs to play as a 3. So I would like us to move back and literally go into a 4. If that means that a Kenzo isn't on the pitch because we're playing with 2 central midfielders and 2 strikers, you're not on the pitch. Let's not put them into another role to accommodate somebody, and let's use them then to come into the game and impact it accordingly. So that's how I would like us to play. And I think that, and that includes down to, hopefully we won't have this issue now with the centre halves that have come in, but I think that was never more evident than the situation on Saturday, where Nyambi goes off, Adams goes into what I think was a 3 at the back, onto the right hand side of a centre half. So in my opinion, we've put definitely one of our best 2 central midfielders in at a centre half out of position when Jake Rooney sat on the bench. And then when he then eventually takes Oza off, he doesn't put his best central midfielder still on the pitch back in midfield. He brings Thompson on and puts him at left wing back and brings Osborne into the middle. So it's constantly too many changes. It's making one substitute but changing 3 or 4 positions all the time. So I think we need to go back, simplify it, get players playing in the right position to get the most out of them. And that includes Mendes Lang on the right.
I think as well, Kieran, that instinctively a defender knows what Tom Cannon's going to do there. He's not a fast player at all, and I think Jake Rooney instinctively knows he's going to drop that shoulder and go down the side. It was another one of these goals where we look back at it and go, just far too easy, which is disappointing from Ebou. But it's not. A natural defender sort of knows that someone like Tom Cannon, who isn't a fast player, is going to try and drop that shoulder and get that ball over. That's very much how Sheffield United set it up, with Brereton Diaz on one side, Can down the middle, and it was sort of interchanging. It's just it was very frustrating to see. And also, I've said this previously. What are the players thinking on a player like Rooney on the bench? What's going through his mind? Thinking, you've took our whole impetus, the engine room out of our midfield. The only thing that we can really take a positive from every week is Ebou. You've just completely. You may as well just gave him a bib and made him the ball boy, because he has the same effect at that area of the pitch. Jake Rooney had to come on. I'm adamant we wouldn't have conceded that goal if Jake Rooney had come on, because he would have instinctively known what to do as a defender. Sorry to cut.
No, it's all right. And I think about Jake Rooney as well, I find it strange how at the start of last season, he was almost one of the first names on the team sheet, I think, for 3 or 4 matches with his performances. They were getting better and better until his injury away at Bolton. And I was really impressed with him. I thought he was taking every opportunity as it came. He was giving 100% like we know Paul Warne likes. And I find it quite strange that now we're in the division above when we are lacking in players down that right-hand side, or when we are in the second half of matches, he's reluctant to play Jake Rooney, Paul Warner. I do find it strange. I think at some point we are going to see Jake Rooney played and brought into the fold. It's usually how Paul Warner does it after a couple of matches of fans wanting to play in the team. They get started. I think we've seen it with Corey Blackett-Taylor been given just starts out of nowhere that no one really expected to happen. And I think James Collins also had one this season at one point. So I think maybe it can happen at some point for Jake Rooney to be given the time in the matchday squad now. But we'll look ahead to Saturday's game now. Norwich away for Derby County. It's a tough game indeed for the Rams. Obviously, I think we were slightly unlucky earlier on the season to come away with nothing after some controversial moments in that match, shall we say, with maybe the ball going out of play, but the linesman and referee not seeing it. But I've got a bit of a preview video here from Connor Southwell from the Pinkham podcast here for you. So we'll play that now and listen to what he has to say ahead of this match.
Hello, everybody at the Rams Talk Podcast. Connor Southwell here from the Pinkham, Chief Norwich City reporter. I just thought I'd come and give you some insight into Norwich's campaign, how they're getting on, obviously ahead of this weekend's clash against Derby at Carrow Road. And we're always really looking forward to Derby coming, particularly seeing Paul Warne as ever. Obviously a Norfolk boy. I know he's maybe not your favourite person at the moment, but it's kind of a weird situation of him being quite highly regarded in Norfolk without actually having any association with Norwich. In terms of how Norwich have performed this season, it's been a funny old season, really. There's inconsistency has probably been the main point throughout it. There's been sort of ups, there's been downs, there's been string of good results. They got to a stage where they'd won like 1 in 9. There's been a real mixed bag, I would say. Where they're at the moment is a really good run. They've won 5 of their last 8. They've just beaten Watford away from home, and they're looking at a run now of 5 of the next 7 being at home, and all of them, I think, bar 1, being against teams in the bottom half. So a really good opportunity for Norwich, who are 2 points off the playoffs. They sit in 8th. With key players to return this weekend, they should have new signing Matej Jurasek available. He's been missing because of Brexit rules after he signed from Slavia Prague. They should have Borja Sainz back after the Derby game. Marcelino Nunez and Anis Ben Slimani might be back. So put all of those into the mix, and it makes some cautious optimism at the moment at Norwich City. But it's been a funny season. There's been a lot going on with off-pitch stuff, injuries, and just inconsistency. But it feels like, just very cautiously, there's some reason and room for optimism. In terms of the players most likely to cause damage to Derby, I think you're looking at Josh Sargent, aren't you, in terms of the goals that he scores, particularly at Carrow Road, where he's been absolutely prolific for Norwich City since the start of last season. Loves scoring at Carrow Road. I think the goal that he scored at Watford on Saturday was his first away from Carrow Road in a significant period of time, since April in 2024. So that gives you a clue. Obviously, coming back from injury a couple of weeks ago, was really impressive against Swansea. He's obviously scored 3 in his last 2 games. So he's feeling confident. He's looking sharp in front of goal, and he is the player that needs to be stopped. I think away from that, Lewis Dobbin has been really impressive. Oscar Schwartau, 18 years old, second youngest player to play over 1,000 minutes in the Championship. He's been really impressive. Emi Marcondes, since signing for Norwich City on a free, has been really impressive. But in terms of danger, you're looking with Borja Sainz out at Josh Sargent. Obviously, we yet to see Matej Jurasek, so we're not quite sure what he will offer. But Josh Sargent, the goals that he gives Norwich, the presence that he leads the front line with, he really is the key man for the Canaries. Yeah, in terms of weaknesses, I think sometimes it's twofold, really. Set pieces and defending set pieces, although that's something that Norwich have got better at over the last month or so, I would say. But there was a stage where basically the bulk of their goals conceded were coming from set pieces. I think also probably if you can get your press right and you can force errors out of Norwich City's back line, they do want to play out from the back. They're pretty regimented in terms of that outlook. If you can do that with real joy, with intensity, with height, and effectively, then you can easily cause mistakes and sort of end up with some really promising positions. Watford did that last weekend. They had 2 glorious opportunities after half-time where they just took the wrong decision or didn't have the quality in the final action that would have punished Norwich after catching them out high up the pitch. And yeah, so those are the two ones I would say in terms of major weaknesses. That Norwich are also playing at the moment with a couple of young fullbacks. Lucian Mahovo, who's been excellent at left back, he's only started 2 games. Callum Fisher as well, who's been excellent this season. So I think wide areas, because of the way that Fisher likes to roll inside, it does leave a lot of space on the right flank to go and exploit, or the Derby's left flank, sorry, to go and exploit and attack. And if your left winger is pacey and can get in behind, there's a real possible outlet there for Derby, I would argue. So yeah, those are the major weaknesses from the Norwich City side. As for my prediction, I think it's very difficult to look at where Derby are at the moment, and difficult to look at where Norwich City are at the moment as well, and really forecast anything other than a Norwich City win. Of course, we know what the Championship is like. When you have a feeling that you're doing well, or you're beginning to build up a little bit of steam, it has a nasty habit of catching you on the chin. So there's certainly no complacency as Derby come to Carrow Road. But Norwich have been very strong at Carrow Road this season. They're, as I said, looking forward to a run where they've got players returning. It's a favourable run of games. They will think that they can amass points to push them closer to the playoffs. And with that in mind, I think that this is going to be a game that Norwich City win. So I'm going to go for a 3-1 win for Norwich City.
Well, it's good to hear Connor predicted a goal for us away from home, which is always nice. Always nice to hear. Lewis Dobbin doing well as well, apparently there, which will surely mean a Lewis Dobbin goal as well in that game. But no, Dan, Kieran, sorry, I'll come to you first about this one. Obviously, Norwich away earlier on the season, we were unfortunate, I think, is playing it down to come away with nothing from that game. A game where controversial goal or two in there. Obviously, we're coming off the back of this January window. We need players to hit the ground running. What's your thoughts ahead of this one, Kieran, and give us your score prediction in there as well?
I think that we will struggle, which might surprise quite a few. It's never really been a good hunting ground from experience. It's a horrible drive to get there. I mean, we've always seemed to struggle. I think the only time I can remember having a bit of joy, well, 2 occasions I can remember having some joy there, was the Frank Lampard year where someone turned the lights out and Joseph Soon, I think, scrambled one over the line and Marriott went mental. And the year when I think Jamie Hansen scored directly from a free kick. So they've been the short-lived moments of joy at Carrow Road during my time. I think this is going to be the end of the Paul Warne era, and I think it's going to be I think we're going to lose 3-0. I hope that isn't the case. That sounds like I was really happy and excited about that, didn't it? But I could equally see, because there's an element where we think this is the one where he goes, I can equally see us turning up and winning or something daft, so that we have to carry on the torture of the Warne era for a bit longer. But I think it could be a very difficult afternoon.
Dan, I'll come to you. Your thoughts ahead of this. What is going to be a really difficult game for Derby, and your score prediction in there as well.
Yeah, I did write a bit of stuff down after you gave the brief earlier. Your man there in the preview just touched on it. I've put there, like, we're going there obviously on a dire run of results. I find it highly unlikely that we'll get anything, but what I will say is Boya Sands serving the last game of his ban. I think that's massive for us. I think it goes without saying, he was electric in the reverse fixture, and he's the reason that they won the game. They were fortuitous with the decisions, but they still are a decent side. It's not a good ground for us to go to. I'm hoping the new lads keep Sargent at bay, because if he's nullified, that's a major goal scoring threat for Norwich gone. I don't expect us to change style, maybe tweak the formation, but I think the style under this man, we've seen already, he won't change. We're going to look for a set-piece goal. I think the goal, which is also leading into my preview, into my prediction for the game, I think the goal is going to come from a cross or a set-piece for Salverson. I think I agree with Kieran as well. I think a loss here costs Paul Warne his job, and it's whether it's a case of, do you want to cut your nose off to spite your tongue, or the fans going to be wanting a loss. going into what is a massive game against Oxford next week, an absolute must-win. I'm going to go. I'm going to marry it with our Norwich friend and say 3-1 to them, and I think also it will be the end of Paul Warne.
Yeah, two predictions there, not in favour of Derby County at the moment, which I think is hard to disagree with considering the form that are on. Hopefully, we're not going to make it a 9th loss in a row, but me personally, I have to agree. I think it's going to be a 3-1 loss for the Rams, unfortunately, away from home. I'm hoping we can get a goal. I forget what it was like to celebrate an away goal. I've not seen one in quite a while myself, personally, going away from home. Quick note as well about that game. Apparently the A47 will be closed in both directions, which will add an hour onto any Derby fans' journey down there. So plan accordingly to that one for the lengthy journey as well. But yeah, I'll round up the podcast here now. So if you have enjoyed it, please don't forget to rate us 5 stars on whatever you're listening on. You can also watch this podcast on YouTube, and you can follow us on all our social medias. So without further ado, I'll start with going to you, Kieran, and then you, Dan. Goodbye from me.
Bye from me.
Hopefully the boys show a lot more personality on and off the ball on Saturday and get stuck into them and give us a bit of joy. It's goodbye from positive old me.